Dennis Theodorou is the managing director of J&J Phillip Holdings, where he leads the firm's global team across sales, strategy, service innovation, and client service. Dennis is responsible for driving aggressive growth and diversification plans, and he holds a logistics, materials, and supply chain management degree from Michigan State University. He also holds certifications in strategic management and service design and operations from Harvard Extension School, and has completed Six Sigma Black Belt training. All right, Dennis, thanks for joining us today. Where does this podcast find you?
Hey, Kane. Thanks for having me. I'm currently in the Metro Detroit area, headquartered here in Troy, Michigan.
Wonderful. You have experience leading teams of different sizes, from small to large, across different industries. And that's why we really wanted to have this chat with you, Dennis. But just to start, what are some of the similarities and the differences between managing teams across different industries, if there are any?
The way you approach an employee from one to another always kind of is like a customizable approach, because you can't really react or handle a situation the same when it's brought up to you. And a lot of times, when you're trying to empower and encourage employees, you have to figure out what makes them tick, how do they respond more positively. And then on the opposite side, when a problem or a challenge is brought up to you, maybe it's an HR related topic, you also have to be empathetic the way you handle things. So no matter what the level of person, whether they're coming out of college or just have a couple of years of work experience, or someone that's a little bit more seasoned within their career, you still have to approach it in a way that's going to positively affect the outcome. And that, unfortunately, it doesn't make our job easier as leaders and managers, because you spend a lot of time trying to figure that out and what the best approach will be to when you're communicating with your team.
Does scale look the same across industries? So have you been able to maybe copy paste like what you're looking for, how you're trying to find these individuals to build a great team across the industries? Or I know you mentioned it was customizable, but how scalable is it?
If you have the right process in place, it's very scalable. When you're kind of going through the hiring process and selecting your team members, and you're going off the cuff, like, hey, we need somebody right now, and you don't have a well thought out plan of attack, it doesn't end really well. In our company, we've developed a way to onboard. First, of course, interview through various meetings, having various people involved in the interview process. We take a lot of pride in how we onboard our new employees. That's typically a lot of training and, again, access to a lot of people within our company. But that is something that has developed over time. We keep tweaking it to enhance the experience. And if you have that sort of plan in place, I believe it's scalable. When you're just reacting to a moment, that's when things can get a little bit challenging.
That kind of fulcrum between reacting and being proactive, how do you get to a place where you can be proactive? Because I imagine as a small company, or as you're building a team, a lot of it is reactionary because you don't have a ton of resources.
Right. I think hiring, for whatever reason, a lot of business owners or managers tend to think of it as a task rather than something that should be implemented as a process, as a culture, as something that's going to be very important and effective for the longevity of the business. No matter if you're a restaurant owner or office manager, whatever the case may be, and you're in charge of hiring, it is extremely important that you are constantly looking out for someone that might be out there that can bring much more value to the business, that will allow you to have a better work experience for yourself, and maybe you can then focus on um, bigger picture items. um, I believe, and I see it, a lot of managers and business owners tend to get extremely involved in the hiring process and not empowering their team. If they, if they have a decent sized team to um, to interview and help with that process. But I feel like they get too involved in a reactionary mode, which makes the business suffer after, because they're taking their own time. They're being, again, they're not as proactive in that. And it takes away from the day-to-day business needs. And it becomes much more of a hindrance in the overall business.
You mentioned something that's pretty interesting, which is like look for people that can make basically like your life easier. Has that individual changed over the last decade and a half? If I think of the spaces you've been in, I mean, food, QSR, executive search, different things, like there's been digital disruption. There's been a lot of different things that have disrupted those industries. Has what you look for changed in that individual?
That's a great question. There's a few traits that somebody can have that doesn't take, you don't need to be a brainiac or have some higher education to have, whether it's effort, attitude, the approach to your work, positive environment. Like, those are things that I tend to look at, no matter if I'm hiring somebody on an hourly basis or someone on a salaried basis. That's like half the battle, showing up and doing your best and trying and just, again, bringing value to the team. Now, you might go after certain qualifications, like certain degrees, maybe higher education, and that individual might not have the right personality that you're looking for to make your life easier. That might backfire and actually do the opposite. So I look at, how does somebody approach the interview? How well prepared are they? Those are things that don't take a lot of effort, but if you have them naturally, that's what excites me when I'm actually speaking to individuals that might be interested in our companies. Is, how do they approach the interview? Are they someone that I can, have a serious conversation at work, but also, at the end of the day, can we go out and have some personal time together, whether it's a drink or eating dinner. Those traits, as long as they can cross over from like work and into the personal side of things, that's something positive.
In order to make it to where you've gotten in your career, I have to imagine that you do embody those traits that you're looking for in somebody that you think would make a great team player or a great leader on your team. Where do you think you learned those for yourself?
I would say overall, the people around me have really gotten me to that point, whether it's my siblings or the bosses I've had in my time. I've also naturally been a little bit more outgoing when it comes to social events, wanting to meet new people, wanting to spark a conversation, no matter where I am, whether it's at work, whether it's at a coffee shop. I am just intrigued about learning and just curious about learning about someone's background and where they're coming from. And I think that has definitely helped me have a lot of connections through work, through personal life. And it's something that I constantly think about, is I don't want a situation where I can't go up and talk to somebody, or I'm shy, because that might, you just don't know who you're talking to sometimes and where that could take you in the long run. And I try to mentor our leaders within our company that report into me to do the same, to always be open for conversation, to be proactive in the conversation rather than waiting for something to happen. And I think for business, you need that. You got to go after the business, you got to go after the sales, you got to go after those conversations instead of waiting for them to happen.
How far do you think someone can go without those social skills? I mean, like, how far does, call it intellect or effort and stuff, take you? Or is really that the missing piece, like being able to go outside and network and build connections?
I think it's a big piece. I don't think it's impossible to not have the, if you're an introvert, but you're an extremely bright individual, I think things still can happen. I'd be foolish to say that it can't. Um, I believe maybe things could happen a little bit faster, or if you're waiting for that right opportunity, but the one that you really want passes by you because you didn't make the effort for that conversation, that's when I think it could get in the way.
Wonderful. Can you reflect on like the last crisis that you've had to lead your organization through? I imagine the biggest one would be COVID. But if there's any others, I mean, feel free to override that one. I'm just interested to know the way that you approach crisis as a leader.
COVID was definitely a big one. It's obviously the most, recent, and many people can talk about how they experienced COVID and how they reacted to dealing with a pandemic like that. For us, we were in a very good position, diversified enough in our business where we were able to sustain some sort of business without going through a major reduction in force or any sort of termination. But I think a lot of our employees were just unsure of what's going to happen. And it wasn't just about COVID, right? It was about their work, how they're going to earn a living, and what's going to happen tomorrow. Is our leader telling us the truth? Is our job secure? It wasn't just about health reasons why employees at that time had on their mind. It was also what's going to happen to us, and a lot of communication. We had an uptick in how often we met in terms of video conferences after we've sent everybody home to work from home. We modified how we meet, and even when things started letting loose a little bit, and how we onboarded our new hires, like a lot of our procedures had been changed to adapt to the whole COVID effect. And again, it had a lot to do with communication and how we were able to connect with our people. Did we lose some folks at that time? Yes, we did. It was more so voluntarily, just because everyone had gone home and they no longer lived in the cities that we operated out of. That was kind of the biggest thing that we saw in terms of people leaving our organization. It was more so like, hey, I'm moving out of the city of Chicago now. I'm back home. I think I'm going to stay here and ride this out and see what happens with COVID type of thing. But other than that, we didn't lose much, and I think it had a lot to do with how we adapted our processes and how we communicated with our people.
That's really interesting. Did that crisis change the way that you lead today? I mean, you can go as technical as you'd like. I'm thinking, do you purposely keep costs down because you in case that happens again? Are there things that you do differently today that you did compared to before?
What we do differently now is we still continue the frequent meetings, which has actually sometimes gotten in the way of production, because we want to make sure that we are in tune with our employees. Before, when you're in an office, you can walk down the hallway, you can walk into somebody's office and kind of understand what they're going through just by the vibe that they have. Where working from home has created such a bottleneck in terms of, are my people okay? Are they thinking about anything? Are they having a tough day? Did something happen? And throughout their day-to-day work, and I just can't help them, and they, for whatever reason, decide not to mention it to anybody. Like before, you were able to spot that very quickly in an office setting. So now, we've created this work from home environment and a lot of video calls, and it takes a lot more time out of the day to be able to check in on somebody, just because it's not just one person you're checking in on, you're checking in on the entire company. And that has definitely had an uptick, which The reverse effect is, you're spending a lot more time making sure that everyone's still feeling good and being productive, and making sure that we're taking care of our people, because we're, again, proactively seeking out any potential issues that may arise.
So let's pivot a little bit here, Dennis. I'm interested to get your take on the labor market and what you're seeing in that space. So you published a recent article on LinkedIn, I think it was, that had a really interesting chart around wages and productivity in the U.S. labor force. But what are you seeing in terms of your clients? In terms of, like, are they looking for different things today than they were 5 years ago because of the things that you've just talked about, or is it pretty similar? Are they making changes in anticipation for a recession, if there is one? Just riff a little bit if you don't mind.
Well, I haven't really gotten the feedback of we have to slow down or we have to make some cuts yet from our manufacturing customers, because they're worried about some sort of recession. For manufacturing type of positions, they're always going to be in need, just because the workforce for so long had decided not to go into manufacturing, and that sector alone has been affected by employees going into tech or going into some sort of financial market, or industry, I should say. So they've always had a need. Now, does business dip during a recession for manufacturers because people are not buying the product as much? Yes, but at the end of the day, if you need a plant manager, no matter what, you're going to need to make that hire. Maybe it's not as many assembly line workers, which a lot of times the manufacturers are using contract to hire type of staffing companies to fill those roles. I will say our customers have been more vocal about salaries of individuals, where I would say in 2021 and part of 2022, they were more open to, having to deal with increase in demand for salary hikes, where before, for many years, we would see a change in a job. Salary increase would be anywhere from, I would say, 3 to 5%. And if you're relocating, it'd be roughly around 10%. Those had doubled and even tripled sometimes in 21 and 22, where now I think a lot of our customers that we're seeing, they're tightening things up a little bit more. They're being a little bit more resilient to that, and pushing back in a lot of ways of what they need out of somebody. For example, coming into the office more frequently, or not being as flexible on the remote work, because they really need the collaboration and the camaraderie internally. So I have been seeing an uptick in that, and the conversations with our customers have been more so around hiring the right mentality. We want work to be about work, and we want people that are going to help us grow and take us to the next level. And how can you do that working 100% from home? So that the conversations have been shifting back to that.
Has there been friction or resistance on the candidate side to that shift in the employer?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a delay, usually, right, where one side hasn't caught up to what's really happening. Our candidates right now are still trying to push on a couple items, the benefits, not just salary, but the benefits overall, and then still pushing for that remote work that's still kind of high in demand. PTO has increased as well, the demand for more PTO days. Those are things that we commonly see. And I think it's just going to take a few more months for things to kind of be even on both sides.
Do you think that there's anything that's going to be enduring from kind of the disruption that the pandemic had? Is there anything that you think, or that you're seeing, that will stay?
I believe certain positions are going to remain working from home or remote work. I don't think it's going to be all of the positions. I think a lot of companies realize certain roles can be done from home and it's okay, but there's quite a few that are coming back into the office, and maybe that will change down the road. I don't think it will. I think companies had the idea of like, well, I get access to more people by allowing the remote work, so they still have that sort of mindset. It's just not as much as it used to be even a year ago.
Okay, wonderful. What have you enjoyed most about the last 10 years of kind of dealing with teams, being a leader through all that disruption?
Honestly, I enjoyed the challenge the most. I like organized chaos. Um, so dealing with different problems is something that I take on. It's not something that I worry about on a day-to-day basis. Um, we've expanded quite a bit. When I first started, we only had our Detroit office, and now we have 4 offices across the U.S. And you're dealing with different personalities, you're dealing with different cultures, different cities, and how people approach work in different cities. And that has just opened my eyes even more, and I enjoy that. That's something that I decide to do every day.
Wonderful. Last question, Dennis. If you were sat across 25-year-old Dennis at dinner, what piece of advice do you think you would give him, knowing what you know now?
I would say being more proactive on being around leadership and asking more questions. When you're coming out of school and you're trying to get a few years under your belt of work, you tend to just be hesitant and not know like what you're capable of. I wish I had a little bit more guidance and push of, let me go talk to those that are most successful and see if I can grab whatever ideas I can, or just put myself in front of those individuals a lot quicker than I had. That's what kind of stands out to me right now if I were to tell my 25-year-old self what to do back then.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for the time, Dennis.
Thank you.
Dennis Theodorou is the managing director of J&J Phillip Holdings, where he leads the firm's global team across sales, strategy, service innovation, and client service. Dennis is responsible for driving aggressive growth and diversification plans, and he holds a logistics, materials, and supply chain management degree from Michigan State University. He also holds certifications in strategic management and service design and operations from Harvard Extension School, and has completed Six Sigma Black Belt training.